Welcome to Digitizing Techniques for using the Hoop-It-All hoops. In this lesson, digitizing software is used for creating oversized designs to be stitched using a Hoop-It-All hoop. We will change the placement of beginning and ending stitches of the design objects, and then stitch an oversized design that appears to be one continuous embroidery. Copyrighted designs from Joni's Design Elements by Joni Zire-Poole are featured within the embroidery design. Every digitizing software program has different capabilities, so please check the documentation of your digitizing software. Your software may not have the functions for this technique. Also see other lessons in this module of digitizing techniques, as not all projects use the same techniques. In addition to a new technique for digitizing, this lesson introduces a number of techniques and enhancements for your embroidery adventures with the Hoop-It-All hoops. In this lesson, embroidery is used to quilt a layer of cotton fabric over batting. The completed project will be used to cover a bed pillow. This technique could also be used for placemats, table runners, and for quilting a quilt. The following instruction builds on topics previously covered in the Basic Techniques module and the previous Digitizing Techniques lesson. You may find it helpful to review these videos before attempting these techniques. Altering the placement of the last stitch of one design object and the first stitch of the next design object can be worked starting at one end of the hoop and continuing on to the other end of the hoop. This project, however, starts with a center design and then builds on each side. The grid in the center was created by starting with a square and then adding grid lines at 1/2 inch intervals with a line tool. The designs around the grid were created by placing and combining several of Joni's design elements. To complete the design, echo stitching was added, filling out the corners. The overall design was then split into 3 hoopings. For each of the 3 hoopings, the design section was grouped with its hoop basting stitches, and the stitch path was determined by using the software's Blackwork Run tool. The result is 4 design objects, basting stitches around the perimeter of the center grid, the grid design object, and the 2 side objects that touch the center grid. In general, this technique is easier if your designs have defined corners or ends to use for identifying the first stitch and the last stitch placement. To establish a stitch path that flows from one hooping to the next, the stitching path for each of the 3 hoopings may need to be altered. The grid is the center of the overall design. Thus, the Hoop-It-All alignment at the embroidery machine will begin at the center of the hoop. Making note of the indicator for the final stitch for the grid, the stitch path of the second design object was altered so that the first stitch is located at the same place as the last stitch of the grid. For the third design, alter its stitch path so that the first stitch touches a designated place on the center design object. Depending on the designs you use, it may be necessary to alter the placement of the last stitch of a design object so you can essentially daisy chain the designs. This method is especially useful for stitching continuous lettering. The embroidery on this project is used to quilt together a layer of cotton fabric over a batting type interfacing. Wash-away sticky stabilizer is hooped and pressed into place in the Hoop-It-All hoop. To assist with finding the center of the hoop, the center markings on the Hoop-It-All hoop are aligned with the grid on the cutting mat below it. The fabric is basted to the batting with pins. The 2 layers are added to the sticky stabilizer by quarter folding and aligning the center before unfolding and pressing into place. To ensure that the layers stay together and properly aligned, basting stitches are stitched around the edge of the hoop with wash-away thread. Stitching the center design starts at the center of the hoop, so the fabric is marked at the center of the Hoop-It-All hoop. Variegated threads often enhance an outline design and give it dimension. A variegated polyester embroidery thread is used to stitch these designs. Since this large design is stitched through several layers, including batting, the first object to be stitched is a rectangle stitched with wash-away thread. To accommodate this fragile thread, slow down your machine while stitching. The machine needle is aligned with the center of the first design object. The Hoop-It-All hoop is adjusted and secured into place. To adjust the hoop for the second design, Loosen the screws on the bracket and shift the hoop so that the first stitch of the second design is aligned with the last stitch from the first design. Tighten the bracket screws. Then make any necessary width adjustments within the embroidery machine until the needle aligns with the last stitch. Stitch the second design. Repeat the process of making lengthwise adjustments to the hoop-it-all hoop and width adjustments with your embroidery machine for any additional hoopings. The completed design is exactly as planned, with all three hoopings perfectly aligned. Not every hoop-it-all project lends itself to the use of the technique of altering the stitch path, but this technique can be quite helpful for designs that have embroidery objects that touch each other or have short distance from each other. Use this method for daisy chaining designs along a length of fabric or for lettering. Author, pattern designer, teacher, and award-winning quilt maker, Joni Zire-Poole has been a quilter all of her adult life and a practitioner of heirloom machine quilting techniques on home sewing machines. Degreed in graphic design, Joni creates unique patterns for quilting, applique, and embroidery in a sophisticated and elegant style. Bookmark her website, www.heirloomquiltingdesigns.com, for information on her books and quilting design packets and news of upcoming events. She has authored 3 books on quilting with a 4th book planned to be released in 2012. We will use a variety of digitizing techniques in these lessons. Please contact American Stitch Works for questions, suggestions, or project ideas. Your input will be considered for creating future lessons and projects. Thank you for taking the time to view this video series. I have been a home sewer since my preteens and in 2003 established my machine embroidery business, American Stitch Works. I hope these tutorials help you to achieve your goals with the Hoop-it-all hoops and your embroidery projects.